So, I want you to imagine, just for a moment, a medieval peasant.
Okay, a peasant.
Yeah, like this is someone who has spent his entire existence, completely bound by the seasons.
Right.
He's looking at dirt, wooden plows, maybe a stone castle way off in the distance if he happens to live near some seat of power.
Sure, so his conceptual universe is just incredibly localized.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
tiny. Now, imagine you possess the ability to just pull him out of time and transport him literally just for 5 minutes into a modern, hyper-cooled server farm.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, like a massive artificial intelligence cluster. And you sit him down in front of this sprawling, glowing monitor, and you just show him the internet.
That would break his mind.
Literally.
Yeah.
You show him live video feeds of cities on the other side of the planet. You show him AI generating photorealistic art in seconds.
Right.
You demonstrate that the sum total of all human knowledge can just be summoned by tapping keys, and then boom, the 5 minutes are up.
Back to the mud.
Back to the mud. You send him back to the year 1200, you drop him in his local tavern, and you basically tell him, hey, explain what you just saw to your village.
I mean, that would be a linguistic impossibility. He simply wouldn't have the vocabulary for it.
Right at all.
He doesn't know the words for fiber optics or data packets or generative algorithm.
Because he hasn't lived through the technological history required to build those concepts.
Exactly. Those concepts require layers of context he just doesn't have.
He has zero access to the mechanics of what he actually witnessed. So what does he do?
He reaches for metaphor, I assume?
Yes, he does what human beings have always done when faced with something totally incomprehensible. He tells the truth, absolutely, but he tells it using the only conceptual tools available in his mental toolbox.
So he describes, like, a magic mirror?
Exactly. A magic mirror. He talks about captured lightning. He might describe a labyrinthine library built of invisible glass or spirits that paint pictures in the blink of an eye.
Right, and the details become incredibly fragmented, very emotional, and completely drenched in symbolism.
And then, centuries later, some modern, rational historian reads his account and chuckles. Look at this quaint, primitive myth about magic mirrors and captive spirits.
Oh, they really didn't understand how the world worked back then, right?
Yeah, but in reality, the peasant wasn't describing magic at all. He wasn't just inventing a fairy tale out of thin air.
No, he was attempting to describe a tangible, physical reality that was simply infinitely more advanced than his framework could process.
His symbols were just an emergency response to a massive influx of data. And that thought experiment serves as the perfect launch pad for what we are exploring today.
It really is a profound starting point.
Yeah, so we are welcoming you listening right now, wherever you are, to join us on this really profound philosophical deep dive.
And we are being guided today by a central concept put forward by Dr. Mohanad Hijazi.
Right. And his premise asks this staggering, almost destabilizing question. What if humanity did the exact same thing with the story of creation?
It's a huge question.
It is. What if the ancient narratives, like specifically the story of Adam and Eve, are not false? What if they aren't these primitive, unscientific fairy tales modern culture assumes them to be?
But rather, incredibly sophisticated symbolic attempts by early humans to explain these advanced multidimensional realities that were completely beyond their comprehension.
It's a lens that completely reorients how we read history, philosophy, and religion. And to thoroughly explore this, we are pulling from a really massive, highly diverse stack of sources today.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover. We are looking at Dr. Hijazi's philosophical writings, obviously.
Right.
But we are also layering in Carl Jung's psychological theories on the collective unconscious
Right.
and Dr. John Walton's extensive academic research on ancient Near Eastern cosmology.
And we've also got the ancient Gnostic creation myth of Sophia from the Nag Hammadi library.
Plus a really brilliant non-dual interpretation of the Book of Genesis presented by Rabbi Olivier Benhaim.
Yeah, and some incredibly dense modern physics papers tackling the observer effect and the hard problem of consciousness. Oh, and contemporary discussions on simulation theory, including academic papers and a really fascinating Reddit thread.
But we should probably establish our parameters right at the outset.
Definitely.
Our goal today is not to preach religion. It is also not to assert a cold, absolute scientific certainty.
Right. We aren't taking a political stance, and we aren't here to declare, one specific theology or scientific model as the undisputed champion of truth.
No, our goal is just to hold these diverse, sometimes wildly conflicting ideas up to the light, completely impartially.
We just want to inspire thought. We want to cultivate a deep, lingering curiosity about existence, about consciousness, and about humanity's continuous, almost desperate historical search to reconnect with something we've lost.
So, to even begin to understand how ancient people might have described a vast, incomprehensible reality like our peasant in the server room, we first have to look at the mechanics of human perception.
Right, like how do we even perceive reality itself? This is a debate that ranges from classical antiquity straight into the heart of modern quantum physics.
And I know Plato's allegory of the cave is sort of the standard touchstone here.
Yeah, everyone knows the cave.
But we need to look at it not just as a philosophy 101 concept, but as a framework for what physics is actually telling us today.
Okay, so let's bypass the basic summary and look at the nuance of Plato's model. He describes prisoners chained inside a cave since birth, facing a blank wall.
Right.
Behind them is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, objects are carried past. So the prisoners only ever see the two-dimensional shadows cast on the wall.
And the crucial element Plato is highlighting isn't just that they are ignorant, it's that because the shadows are the totality of their sensory input, they believe those shadows are the absolute, ultimate truth of reality.
And they don't know they're looking at a projection. Like, if they hear a dog bark and see a dog-shaped shadow, to them, the shadow itself is producing the bark.
Exactly. The shadow is the dog.
Yeah. And Plato argues that truth only exists when consciousness manages to break the chains, step outside the cave, and perceive the actual three-dimensional forms casting those shadows.
Because the people inside the cave only have a preconception of external reality based on a highly limited data stream.
Right. So if a freed prisoner came back down and tried to explain the blinding light of the sun, or the three-dimensional complexity of a real tree,
the prisoners wouldn't have the conceptual architecture to understand it. They'd probably think the freed prisoner had literally lost his mind.
which maps perfectly onto the physics paper we have in our stack today. This paper explores the hard problem of consciousness, and it essentially updates Plato's cave with modern scientific rigor.
It states that physical reality is always, inescapably, experienced as a model.
Right. We never interact with reality directly.
No, we interact with a sensory model, like the subjective feeling of redness when we see an apple, or the feeling of hardness when we knock on a table.
Or we interact with a conceptual model, like describing that apple using electromagnetic wave frequencies or atomic structures.
And the paper introduces a concept called observer-observed simultaneity.
Okay, unpack that, because that's dense.
To understand this, we have to look at how physics traditionally views time versus how we actually experience it. The paper argues that physical reality exists temporally as a sequence of causal events. A happens, which causes B to happen.
Right, a straight line.
But empirically, in the conscious mind of the observer, reality exists as A and B simultaneously. The past and future aspects of space-time are basically stitched together by the subjective mind of the observer to create the experience of a continuous present.
The author points out a staggering limitation, right?
Yeah.
Matter is always and only knowable as some form of a model.
Yes. We can never, ever know what matter really is, independent of an observer.
I really want to make sure this lands for you listening, because it's a massive paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that an observer function is absolutely mechanically necessary for matter to even distinguish itself from nothingness?
Well, the physics paper suggests that any empirically testable description of reality must reflect the process of human perception.
So without the observer, reality is just an undefined soup of potential.
That is precisely what the quantum mechanical framework suggests, and it aligns with a philosophical position called dual aspect monism, or what the physicist Bernard de Spagna referred to as veiled realism.
Okay, dual aspect monism is a big term. If I'm understanding the mechanics of this correctly, is it like a coin?
How do you mean?
Well, we look at reality and we only ever see heads, which is physical matter, or we see tails, which is conscious experience. But the metal making up the coin itself, the foundational substance that allows both to exist, is this veiled realism that we can never actually touch or measure directly.
That is actually a very effective analogy. Veiled realism suggests there is an underlying foundational reality, the metal of the coin, that is permanently veiled from our direct sensory and scientific experience.
Okay.
And from this hidden, non-local reality, both the physical world we can measure with instruments and the conscious minds we experience subjectively co-emerge. They are basically two aspects of a single, unreachable whole.
I'm going to push back here, or at least play devil's advocate regarding how we treat ancient texts.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see a pervasive arrogance in modern culture.
Oh, absolutely.
We look back at ancient myths, the creation stories of the Sumerians, the Egyptians, the early Hebrews, and we dismiss them as bad science. We say, oh, they thought the sky was a solid dome holding back water. How quaint, how primitive.
Right.
But doesn't this physics paper completely undercut our modern arrogance? If our empirical science acts as if it can describe matter without an observer, the paper argues that is literally impossible.
Yes, it does. Modern science uses mathematical models and conceptual models to describe reality. The ancients used narrative models and mythological symbols.
But fundamentally, aren't both just different ways of trying to describe the exact same shadows on the cave wall?
That is exactly the profound realization the synthesis invites. Mathematical models, like the equations for electromagnetic radiation, are highly effective abstract systems we use to predict the behavior of the physical world. Mythological models were systems the ancients used to predict and understand the behavior of the cosmos and their place within it.
And the physics paper notes something crucial here. Matter is entirely indifferent to our models.
Precisely. A storm behaves the exact same way whether we explain it using the curvature of space-time and atmospheric pressure differentials, or whether we explain it as the wrath of a thunder god.
What changes is how humans behave based on the meaning they derive from those respective models.
Yes. Science gives us predictive utility. Myth gives us behavioral meaning.
So if an ancient mystic or a prophet managed to briefly step outside Plato's cave, like if they experienced a state of absolute unity or a glimpse to the metal of the coin beyond the veil of this reality.
They couldn't come back down into the cave and write quantum field equations on the wall. They didn't have the math.
Right. If they experienced a multidimensional reality, they could only communicate it using the localized three-dimensional shadows they knew. They would talk about gardens. They would talk about trees.
They would talk about serpents and dust. We have to violently separate the truth of an experience from the ability to explain that truth mechanically. The inability of an ancient person to explain a transcendent experience using the scientific method does not negate the reality of the experience itself.
It simply highlights the limitations of their linguistic and conceptual tools. So if we accept that these ancient stories are narrative models describing something profound, then to actually decode them, we can't read them like a modern physics textbook.
No, we have to understand the operating system of the ancient mind. We have to look at how they defined existence itself.
In looking through the research of Dr. John Walton on ancient Near Eastern cosmology, it becomes immediately apparent that their definition of existence was completely fundamentally different from ours.
It requires a total paradigm shift for a modern reader. Walton's research points out that in the post-Enlightenment Western world, we operate on a material ontology.
Okay, meaning what?
For us, something exists if it possesses physical properties. If you can detect it with your senses, if it has atoms, mass, and occupies space, it exists. Therefore, creation, to a modern mind, implies manufacturing physical matter out of a vacuum.
But the ancients had a functional ontology. Something only existed if it had a role, a purpose, or a function within an ordered system.
Yes. To understand this, look at how Egyptian and Mesopotamian texts describe non-existence. Before creation, the universe wasn't a vacuum of empty space. It wasn't an absence of matter.
Non-existence was an excess of chaos. It was a lack of order.
The texts describe it as a trackless desert or limitless unbounded primordial waters. The Egyptian creation accounts refer to the pre-creation state as having no boundaries, no names, and no diversification.
So to them, creating the universe wasn't about making matter pop into existence out of nowhere. It was about assigning function to chaos.
Exactly.
The analogy Walton uses in his work absolutely cracked this open for me. Think about it like a business.
I love this analogy.
Yeah, so to a modern scientific mind, the universe is a machine. We want to pull it apart, see how the gears interlock, and figure out what kind of metal the gears are made of. But to the ancient mind, the universe is a massive corporation.
Right.
Now imagine a company builds a spectacular multi-million-dollar office building. The physical structure is there. It has desks, state-of-the-art computers, plumbing, and electricity. But the doors are locked. There are no employees.
There is no CEO. No products are being designed or sold.
Exactly. Does that business exist?
In our modern material sense, the physical building exists. But functionally, as a business, it does not exist at all. It is a non-entity.
Right. The business only exists the moment the door is open, people are hired, The accounting department is separated from the marketing department,
Sure.
and everyone is given a specific job description.
Therefore, in the ancient mind, creation is the act of opening the business. It's the act of separating elements and assigning them roles.
Which is precisely the mechanical process we see repeated across ancient texts. Creation is almost universally described as an act of separation.
Like in the Sumerian text, the Song of the Hoe, the genesis of the world begins when the god Enlil separates heaven from earth.
Or in the Egyptian Memphite theology, creation is the process of the one becoming the many through the assignment of distinct roles and territories.
They aren't trying to describe the Big Bang or the synthesis of heavy elements in the hearts of dying stars. They are describing taking an undifferentiated, non-functional reality and dividing it into an ordered, functioning system.
And Walton notes something else critical. The ancients didn't view the cosmos as a cold machine running on autopilot. It was an environment absolutely saturated with divine presence.
And humans weren't viewed as biological accidents that happened to evolve on a rock.
No, in ancient Near Eastern literature, humans are hired for a very specific cosmic function. Walton calls it the Great Symbiosis.
Humans and the divine realm work together to maintain the intricate order of the cosmos. Humanity's role is to ensure the smooth operation of this vast functional system.
So the physical materials used to construct humans in these myths, whether it's dust, clay, or the blood of a defeated god, those have profound archetypal, symbolic significance. They're not meant to be read as literal material recipes.
Okay, so if we take this functional symbolic lens, this understanding that ancient writers are describing the assigning of roles and the separation of elements rather than material manufacturing.
And we apply it to the most famous, most fiercely debated creation myth of all. The story of Adam and Eve completely transforms. It stops being a biological history.
It ceases to be a literal account of two biological humans making a catastrophic mistake with a piece of magical fruit. And it reveals itself as a deeply profound philosophical description of the dawn of human consciousness.
We have this incredible source from Rabbi Olivier Ben-Haim. He presented a non-dual interpretation of the book of Genesis at a conference, and it blows the traditional Orthodox reading wide open.
It really does. He starts by analyzing the original Hebrew.
In Genesis 2, the text uses the specific term YHVH Elohim, which in English is usually translated simply as the Lord God. But Ben-Haim breaks down the linguistic mechanics of these two names.
It's a vital distinction. YHVH, the four-letter, unpronounceable name, represents spirit. It represents that which is entirely beyond words, beyond concepts, and beyond localized thoughts.
It is the metaphysical, the transcendent, the infinite formless.
Elohim, conversely, represents the immanent. It represents the manifest, the physical world of form, the multiplicity of nature.
So combining them into YHVH Elohim represents the ultimate non-dual reality. It is nothingness and isness existing simultaneously.
Emptiness and form, perfectly unified.
It's exactly what the modern physics paper was calling the foundational veiled reality before the conscious observer splits it into subject and object.
And then we look at how the text treats Adam. In Genesis 2.7, it states that YHVH Elohim formed Adam from the dust of the Adamah, the ground.
But Ben-Haim points out a crucial sequencing detail here. This happens before the material world, the plants, and the animals are fully formed and separated.
Right. He suggests, through a deep reading of the Hebrew, that Adam is not a biological man of flesh and blood at this point.
Adam is a cloud of dust from the Adamah, a pure energy being, a unified soul that contains both masculine and feminine energies perfectly synthesized.
A state of perfect unity. The drop of water is still entirely indistinguishable from the massive ocean. There is no duality yet. There is no self and other.
And then we get the creation of Eve. The English translation says God takes a rib from Adam's side. But Ben-Haim argues that since Adam doesn't possess a physical skeletal body yet, the rib is a pure metaphor.
It's the divine act of separating the feminine energies from the masculine energies within that original energy being.
And the Hebrew etymology backs this up in a way that just blew my mind. The Hebrew words for man and woman, ish and isha, both derive from the exact same root word. Yes, esh, which translates to fire or energy. Ancient Hebrew is built on a triliteral root system, where the structural letters of a word carry deep conceptual weight. To an ancient Hebrew listener, the phonetic connection between man, woman, and fire would have been blatantly obvious.
So the creation of Eve is the literal splitting of this primordial unified fire into polarities. It is the necessary introduction of duality, the one becoming two.
And then we get to the trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Ben-Haim argues this tree doesn't represent a test of obedience. It represents exactly what it says. primordial polarity,
The original dualism.
the essential dualistic consciousness required to navigate a physical world. Good and evil, up and down, hot and cold, self and other.
And here is the most paradigm-shifting, controversial part of his textual analysis.
Brace yourselves for this one.
The serpent actually told the truth.
Okay, if I'm a listener who grew up in a traditional religious framework, that sentence probably just made me hit pause. Defend that. How does the villain of the story tell the truth?
Let's look at the mechanics of the narrative. The serpent tells Eve that if she eats the fruit, she will not die, but her eyes will be opened and she'll be like Elohim, knowing good and evil.
And Ben Haim points out a stubborn textual fact. They didn't die that day. They didn't drop dead in the garden.
What happened was exactly what the serpent predicted. Their eyes were open to duality. They recognized they were naked, which is the realization of the boundary between self and other.
To be like Elohim means to enter the immanent world, the manifest world of form and multiplicity. By eating the fruit, they actively left the formless, non-dual, unified space of YHVH and entered the dualistic, physical, separated world of Elohim.
Which means, the fall wasn't a punishment.
The entire theological framework of original sin completely dissolves in this non-dual reading. It wasn't a crime scene where humanity ruined a perfect plan. It was a birth story.
Entering the dualistic world of form requires leaving the non-dual awareness.
Think about the mechanics of human birth. It's the perfect analogy. The womb is a state of non-dual perfection. The fetus is completely one with the mother. It doesn't know hunger, it doesn't know cold, it doesn't know isolation or loneliness. All its needs are met instantly without effort.
But a fetus can't stay in the womb forever.
Right. To truly experience life, to experience the vast world of form and relationship, it has to die to the womb. It is forced out, often violently and painfully, into a world where it suddenly, jarringly experiences duality.
The freezing air against its wet skin versus the warmth of a blanket. The agonizing cramp of hunger in its stomach versus the satisfaction of milk.
The trauma of the fall of man is just the trauma of consciousness being born into a physical body.
If we pull back and connect this interpretation to the bigger picture, it aligns seamlessly with Dr. Mohanad Hijazi's central philosophical thesis.
Right, which posits that physical existence is not a penalty imposed on humanity by an angry deity for a primordial mistake. Rather, the physical world is a temporary, necessary container. The physical body is a highly specialized vessel designed to allow universal consciousness to experience the friction of individuality.
But I have to push back here.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am sitting in traffic right now, or dealing with a chronic illness, or watching the news and seeing the sheer scale of global suffering, war, and famine, well, it feels incredibly romantic, maybe even insensitive, to say, oh, we willingly chose this just to experience the friction of individuality.
I understand that entirely.
If the original state was this perfect non-dual unity, this boundless ocean of consciousness where there is no pain, why would it ever choose to splinter itself into billions of fragile, vulnerable human containers?
Why would we willingly walk out of the Garden of Eden into a world of disease and warfare?
Exactly.
No.
What could possibly justify the agony of separation?
It is the ultimate philosophical problem, theodicy, the problem of pain. Hijazi tackles this directly, and his answer requires us to conceptualize infinity.
He asks us to imagine humanity originally existing as one connected, singular consciousness, like billions of drops of water perfectly merged inside one single ocean. In a state of absolute total connection, there are no misunderstandings.
Because everyone is the same entity.
Right. There is no isolation, no physical barriers, and certainly no fear, because there is no other to be afraid of.
It sounds like absolute peace.
It is peace, but Hijazi suggests that total infinite connection may also be emotionally hollow. Consider the mechanics of experience. Time only becomes meaningful when there is change. Movement creates the measurement of time. Distance creates duration.
So if you exist in a state of timeless, infinite unity where everything is instantly known and perfectly connected, existence itself is devoid of the friction required to generate emotion.
Precisely.
You're saying that without separation, there is no longing.
Yes.
Without distance, there is no journey of discovery. Without the rigid boundaries of individuality, there is no possibility of physical touch or the emotional relief of reunion.
You literally cannot experience the profound, overwhelming joy of loving someone else if there is no someone else.
Wow. The physics paper we discussed earlier actually provides the mechanical justification for this, doesn't it?
Yes, observer-observed duality. The splitting of the universe into me and everything else creates logical possibilities for experience that simply could not exist in a unified state.
To know oneself, to love oneself, one must be able to observe oneself from the outside. That requires a split into subject and object. The physical universe, with all its harsh, agonizing dualities, is the necessary architectural framework for the mind to experience itself subjectively.
The paradox here is staggering. We spend our entire human lives trying to escape the feeling of loneliness. We view loneliness as a pathology.
We desperately seek out romantic partners, we join massive communities, we obsessively curate social media profiles just to feel seen and understood.
But according to Hijazi's theory, loneliness isn't a glitch in the human condition. It is the exact price of admission we happily paid.
We agreed to the agony of isolation so that we could experience the absolute triumph of bridging the gap.
It completely recasts the entirety of human suffering and yearning. It frames it not as a punishment for a cosmic crime, but as the necessary, unavoidable friction for a profound experiment in consciousness.
We separated so that we could experience the specific gravity of connection. This concept maps beautifully onto Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious, which is another major pillar in our source stack today.
Right. Walk me through how Jung's psychology supports this idea of a unified consciousness experiencing separation.
Jung proposed that beneath our personal unconscious, which is the part of our mind shaped by our individual day-to-day experiences, lies a much deeper universal psychic system.
This is the collective unconscious.
Yeah, and Jung argued it is identical in all individuals. It is inherited, not developed. It isn't shaped by what happens to you. It is the structural foundation you are born with.
Jung was basically a scientist trying to describe the anima mundi, the world's soul. The idea that there is an immortal, unified body of unconscious energy that we are all tapped into, whether we realize it or not.
We are all individual, separated drops, but we share the exact same water chemistry.
Yes, and Jung believed this collective unconscious houses the archetypes, the primordial, universal images and instincts that shape human experience. Things like the archetype of the mother, the hero, the shadow.
In his view, our individual consciousness, our localized ego, is just a small, fragile, separated fragment that rises briefly out of this massive, unified ocean of the collective unconscious.
Okay, so if we are these localized fragments of a divine, unified whole currently experiencing the friction of separation, what exactly is the nature of this physical framework we are navigating?
Because looking around, it doesn't always feel like a beautifully designed school for empathy. It often feels broken.
And some of our sources suggest this world might be an artificial, perhaps inherently flawed construct. Which brings us to the Gnostic texts, specifically the myth of Sophia, found in ancient writings like the Nag Hammadi Library.
Just to provide brief context for you listening, the Nag Hammadi Library was a collection of early Christian and Gnostic texts discovered hidden in a jar in Egypt in 1945.
These texts offer a radically different theological perspective that was largely suppressed by Orthodox traditions. The Gnostics had a very specific and somewhat dark take on the creation of the material world.
They didn't think the creator of the physical universe was the good guy.
Far from it. For the Gnostics, the ultimate perfect source of all existence is called the monad, a singular, transcendent, incomprehensible divine entity. From the monad emanate spiritual beings called eons.
You can think of eons like rays of sunlight emanating from the sun. They are distinct, but made of the same substance.
And these eons live in a state of perfect harmony and fullness called the pleroma.
And one of these eons is named Sophia, which translates to wisdom.
Correct. But Sophia experiences a dangerous desire. She wants to understand and emulate the immense creative power of the monad. However, she acts unilaterally without her designated male counterpart and without the monad's consent.
She attempts to create on her own.
Right. And because her creation is separated from the perfect unity of the monad, the result is a cosmic error. She inadvertently gives birth to a monstrous, flawed entity known as the demiurge.
And the demiurge is arrogant, ignorant, and unaware of the true transcendent monad above him. He believes he's the supreme, only God, and so he proceeds to build the physical, material universe.
Yes. The Gnostics viewed the material world not as a perfect paradise that humanity ruined through sin, but as an inherently flawed, corrupt, and restrictive system designed by a lesser, ignorant architect. It is a prison of matter.
But here's the crucial twist. Because Sophia, an eon from the true divine realm, was involved in the error, a divine spark, a microscopic fragment of the true transcendent divine essence, became trapped inside humanity, imprisoned within this flawed material construct.
So, in the Gnostic view, humanity is a walking paradox. Our physical bodies are part of the corrupt, flawed matrix built by the demiurge, but our inner consciousness holds a piece of the ultimate divine truth.
We are both a rebellion against the natural order and the only potential mechanism for redeeming it.
Exactly. Now, what happens when we strip away the ancient mythological language of eons, monads, and demiurges, and we apply modern technological conceptual models to that exact same narrative?
This is where my brain completely short-circuited while prepping for this deep dive. Because reading the Gnostic myth of a lesser, ignorant creator building a flawed material universe to trap divine consciousness, well, right after reading the academic paper on business models for the simulation hypothesis,
The parallels are terrifying.
the structural parallel is stunning. The Gnostic demiurge sounds exactly point for point like a flawed AI or a rogue programmer running a massive, perhaps buggy universal simulation.
The simulation hypothesis, popularized by philosophers like Nick Bostrom, proposes that our reality is a highly advanced computer simulation, likely run by a post-human civilization with immense computing power.
The academic paper we reviewed, titled Business Models for the Simiverse, asks a very practical mechanical question. Why would an advanced civilization invest the staggering thermodynamic and computational resources required to simulate an entire universe?
What is the functional business justification for running the program?
The paper introduces a computer science concept called computational irreducibility. Let me see if I can explain the mechanics of this simply. Imagine you want to know the weather exactly 1 year from today.
Okay.
You can't just write a simple equation and skip to the answer. The system of global weather is so complex with so many interacting variables that there is no shortcut.
Right. To find out what happens on day 365, you literally have to simulate day 1, then day 2, then day 3, all the way to 365.
You cannot predict the outcome. You have to run the code and watch it play out.
That is a perfect explanation of computational irreducibility. The paper suggests that a highly advanced civilization might run a simiverse because they simply don't know what will happen. Simulation is a method to explore complex social, evolutionary, or physical dynamics that cannot be predicted mathematically.
They have to let the code run to see the result.
If the universe is a simiverse, then we are the code playing out. And this ties directly into the Reddit discussion thread we pulled into our source stack today. The thread attempted to integrate concepts of reincarnation and collective consciousness into simulation theory, and it was brilliant.
The user in that thread basically argued that if this is a simulation, then spiritual concepts like reincarnation, karma, and the collective unconscious aren't woo-woo mystical magic. They are mechanical, functional features of the operating system. They're software loops.
Think about how we train artificial intelligence right now. If we want an AI to learn how to play Super Mario, we don't just tell it the rules, we let it play the game.
It runs forward, falls in a pit, and dies.
The algorithm resets, remembers where the pit is, runs forward, jumps over the pit, and hits a Goomba. It dies.
It resets again, armed with slightly more data. It runs millions of iterations, dying and resetting, until it perfectly understands the environment. The Reddit user hypothesized that reincarnation is the exact same mechanism for the human soul.
The user posited that the computational goal of the simulation is the evolution of perfect empathy, that we, as localized fragments of a singular collective consciousness, are running through a cyclical journey of reincarnation to gather data.
We incarnate into every possible role. You live a life as the wealthy elite, then the system resets, and you live a life as the destitute beggar.
You live as the oppressor, and then as the oppressed.
To gather the data of experience. The hypothesis is that true system-wide empathy can only emerge when every single soul has lived every single perspective, traversing the entire agonizing tapestry of history until we fully transcend our divisions.
The simulation is a training ground, a computational crucible, designed to force the divine spark to achieve complete compassion.
This raises an incredibly important question about how this underlying code manifests in us right now. Think back to Jung's collective unconscious. Jung debated extensively whether these universal archetypes were inherited genetically, like eye color, or transmitted spiritually.
To illustrate his point, he frequently used the example of the yucca moth. The yucca moth has a fascinating, highly specific life cycle.
Oh, this part is wild.
On exactly one night in its incredibly short life, the moth instinctively knows how to gather pollen from the yucca flower, form it into a specific pellet shape, and transport it to another specific flower to lay its egg in a way that guarantees food for the larva while pollinating the plant.
The moth doesn't go to school to learn this. It doesn't watch its parents do it. It just wakes up and executes a highly complex set of instructions.
Exactly. It possesses intuitive, pre-programmed knowledge. Now, apply that mechanism to humanity. In the context of a simiverse, or a Gnostic material trap, or Hijazi's physical container, these deep-seated archetypes
Our intrinsic desires, our universally shared myths, our instinctual fears.
are the pre-programmed background code of the simulation. They are the divine spark, the lingering encrypted memory of the monad, running quietly beneath our conscious operating system, subtly guiding our avatars.
Which brings us back to Dr. Hijazi's central reflection. How does this latent code, this encrypted memory, reminding us of our original unity, manifest in the broad strokes of human history?
Hijazi points out something so incredibly obvious, but it completely changes color when you look at it through this philosophical lens. He asks, why do humans feel so profoundly disconnected from the natural world?
It is a striking anomaly. Every other biological organism on Earth naturally adapts to its environment. If the climate gets colder, an animal evolves thicker fur. If predators increase, they evolve better camouflage or faster reflexes.
They change to fit the world. Humans, on the other hand, do not adapt to the environment. We violently, obsessively reshape the environment to adapt to us.
We don't grow thicker fur. We invent HVAC systems and build artificial climates inside square boxes. We pave over ancient forests to build sprawling concrete cities. We are currently pouring billions of dollars into creating entirely simulated digital worlds in virtual reality.
We are a species deeply, fundamentally unsettled in the natural world. Hijazi asks, what if this constant, restless modification of physical reality is happening because humanity subconsciously remembers that it once belonged somewhere else?
To a different state of being entirely. We are homesick for the infinite ocean, but we are trapped on dry land, so we are obsessively trying to build an artificial ocean.
Human history, then, isn't just a random series of wars and inventions. It is the story of an endless, desperate attempt to reconnect.
We lost the primordial non-dual unity. We were born out of the womb of YHVH into the harsh duality of Elohim, and ever since that moment we have been trying to bridge the gap between separated drops of consciousness.
Look at the evolution of human connection. At first, we attempted to bridge the gap physically. We sought connection through the tribal unit, through bloodlines, through romantic partnerships, and through the profound physical intimacy of touch.
We built tightly knit communities to stave off the terrifying isolation of the individual container.
But as our civilization evolved, our methods of seeking connection scaled up. They became technological. We built postal systems to send thoughts across oceans. Then we built telegraphs to send them faster.
Then telephones to hear the vibration of a voice across continents. And eventually, we built the internet, global social media networks, and now artificial intelligence.
Here is the truly staggering reframing. There is a very common narrative today that technology is unnatural. We are constantly told that cell phones and social media are isolating us, destroying our empathy, and pulling us away from our true, ancient human nature.
But what if civilization and technology are actually humanity's desperate, subconscious, archetypal attempt to rebuild the ocean we left?
That completely flips the script.
The internet isn't a deviation from our nature. It is a synthetic, externalized version of Jung's collective unconscious. It is a shared, universal, instantaneous network of human thought, imagery, and archetypes.
Jung wrote that the collective unconscious constantly strives to lead conscious processes back into old, familiar paths. Our technological drive is a mirror. It reflects our deepest, most primal desire.
To be telepathically, instantly connected to all of humanity again. We are using silicon chips and fiber optic cables to reconstruct the Garden of Eden. We're trying to cure the agonizing loneliness of the separated drop by building a digital ocean, where time and distance, the very mechanics of the physical universe that cause separation, no longer exist.
When you look at an instant message arriving on your phone, or you jump on a global video call with someone in Tokyo and someone in London simultaneously, you are looking at the literal annihilation of distance.
You are looking at a return to instantaneous connection. We are trying to build our way back to the monad.
We have covered immense ground today. We started with the linguistic limitations of a medieval peasant and Plato's allegory of the cave, showing how our perception of reality is fundamentally veiled.
We looked at how modern physics confirms that the observer is necessary to collapse the physical world into measurable form.
We looked at the ancient Near Eastern functional cosmology, realizing that ancient texts weren't doing bad material science. They were assigning meaning and function to chaos.
We saw that the story of Adam and Eve isn't a tragedy of sin and punishment. It is the brave, necessary, and painful birth of human consciousness out of non-dual perfection and into the friction of duality.
We explored the terrifying but beautiful idea that the pain of separation, the deep ache of human loneliness, is the necessary mechanical friction required to experience love, time, longing, and true empathy.
And we synthesized the ancient Gnostic myth of a flawed material universe with the modern simulation hypothesis, suggesting that this physical reality is simply the computational playground. It is the training ground where the code of the divine spark learns compassion.
So we want to ask you, listening right now, the next time you look at your glowing smartphone screen, or you feel the complex, heavy weight of your relationships, or you experience one of those profound, quiet moments of isolation and loneliness.
Don't reframe that loneliness as a failure. Don't look at it as a glitch in your psychology or a sign that you are broken. Reframe it as the cosmic homing beacon of a separated drop, yearning for the ocean.
It is the encrypted code of the divine spark remembering where it came from.
It is the ultimate proof that you are, and always have been, an integral part of a much greater whole.
And we want to leave you with one final provocative thought, something to mull over on your commute or as you go to sleep tonight, that builds on everything we've just discussed.
We hear a tremendous amount of debate today about the technological singularity, the theoretical future moment when artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence and human consciousness essentially merges with technology.
It is almost universally painted in science fiction as a terrifying leap into an unknown dystopian future.
But what if it isn't? What if it is not a leap forward into the unknown, but a return?
What if the singularity is actually the final closing of the loop? What if our ultimate technological destination is simply humanity finally succeeding in building a bridge back to the exact monad, the exact non-dual Garden of Eden that we willingly left at the dawn of time?
Only this time, after thousands of years of running the simulation, after millions of lifetimes of learning empathy through the grueling friction of duality, we return not as innocent, ignorant children in a garden, but as fully realized masters of our own existence.
We return having fully understood the shadows on the wall, ready at last to step outside the cave together.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Take care, everyone.